Reg Bailey has a background in industry and a number of current roles. He's council member of the Advertising Standards Authority, chair of trustees for the YMCA in England and Wales, and with the British Board of Film Classification, he's on the advisory panel on children's viewing. Reg is also a former chief executive of the Mothers Union and an honorary canon of St Albans Cathedral.
If you think about public trust in government, picked up by the British Social Attitude Survey, is at an all-time low in the last 40 years, this last year. I think the same can be argued for things like the church, where we've got sort of responsibilities on it, business, advertising, and the media, you know, the whole situation with the BBC recently. And if that is the case, that is there, then people start to think if it's okay for those organisations to behave like that, then perhaps it's okay for us as individuals too, because we take our leads from those things that have been formally trusted. And where does it come from? I think, well, one of the benefits of the massive changes in technology is that stories that once upon a time might have been successfully suppressed, they go viral in no time at all, which challenges our society in all sorts of ways. But the downside of that, of course, is a lack of accountability for those stories. So lies get spread just as quickly as truth.
And in your role with your various hats on, what are you doing to kind of counter this disinformation and to promote truth?
Well, one of the things I think that's been most important to me has been my concerns about the growth in what are called digital dark patterns in, for example, website design. A digital dark pattern is a form of website user interface that's been crafted to really carefully trick people into doing things, such as buying, I don't know, overpriced insurance with their purchase or signing up for recurring bills. There's some aspects of that where people, there are about 10 or 12 different things that people are using that are part of that digital dark pattern. But I think one of the most perhaps common one is what you might, well, what Americans call a roach motel, where in the US it's a form of trap for cockroaches where they can get in but they can't get out again. And but if you don't like that analogy, if you're an Eagles fan, you know, there's the Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave. And that applies. And this is a lovely test for people who watch the podcast. If you want to see how this operates, most people have got an Amazon account. Try to close your Amazon account and try to work out how many steps you need to go through to try and work it out. And the short answer is you can't until you speak to somebody on their web chat function. But you have to go through numerous steps to try to get to that point. It's like finding a way out literally of a maze. A link for a little video that runs that tells you exactly how to close your Amazon account, but also points out to you just how difficult it is to do. So that's one thing where I'm really trying to encourage people to learn about digital dark patterns. And then in my role at the ASA, we're constantly working to try and pull ads that are not legal, decent, honest, and truthful. I'm proud to be a small part of it, but you know, we face an absolute uphill struggle because we need to be as clever as the people who are trying it on. In the last year or so, we've been experimenting quite strongly and investing in machine learning and AI to try and spot scam ads. But that work is just beginning. So far, we've pulled out hundreds, if not thousands of ads that are exploiting people, that people have never made a complaint about, which is where most of the things that we are dealing with come from, but really are exploiting people without even realizing it. So that's, you know, a key thing for me to do, to keep doing my little part of that.
And clearly you're in quite a privileged position being part of the ASA, but what can the rest of us do to combat the disinformation and promote truth?
Yes, well, I gave that a lot of thought thinking about it. How do all of us take the responsibility? And I think we are all vulnerable in some form or another to this form of lying. And And frankly, we're up against the best brains in the world who work for these tech companies when we are trying to take it on. So you can't overcome it. But what you can do is prompt people to think for themselves about it, to spot false facts. I would love more people to understand how digital dark patterns work. And I think if we're within families or wider groups of friends, constantly well, not constantly because you'll bore people to death, but making sure that people understand what digital dark patterns mean and the sort of traps it sets for people, so that people take a bit more time than simply clicking on a website that's taking you through a particular process. I think that's the first thing, to try and get ourselves more aware of the fact that they exist. And I think the second is, and I learned this when I was doing some work with 10 Downing Street, I realized that government does it all the time, which is to keep thinking about, why has a particular story found its way into the media? Who stands to gain from it? And why have they placed this story at this particular time? Because generally speaking, most news that reaches us has been planted and put in front of journalists. There's not so much investigative journalism as there perhaps used to be, but there's certainly plenty of people who are feeding particular lines. And I think that's fascinating. If we keep asking ourselves those questions about, why is this story reached the media? Who stands to gain from it? And why at this particular time? If we start asking those questions, we start to be, I think, a lot clearer about where is truth. And it's the first step to teaching ourselves and others. And it's the first step in teaching ourselves resilience to it. And I think there's an absolute truth in saying, if we don't value truth well, then actually it is always the most vulnerable that suffer. And that's an affront to me, to my concept of social justice.
There are 5 basic questions about truth in these podcasts. We're asking them of a wide variety of people to keep the conversation going.